Good day, everyone. We are Group 2, and our topic for today is the Chapter 5 Global Governance. I am one of the 10 reporters that will discuss for the said topic. First, student must know the learning outcomes, because at the end of this lesson, learners are expected to 1. Describe the character contemporary global governance. 2. Describe competing perspectives of global governance. 3. Explain the role of international organizations. And lastly, evaluate the impact of globalization on contemporary governance. And without further ado, let us define global governance. Global governance is based on the rights and laws that are enforced by a mix of economic and moral incentives and involves activities that transcends national boundaries at the international, transnational, and regional levels. And it also aims to bring global public goods, including as peace and security, as well as dispute resolution and justice systems, and as well as the functional markets and harmonized trade and industrial standards. For further broader knowledge, stay, listen, and focus.
Interstate global governance. National governments still operate as sovereign powers in several ways, but in the aspect of growing involvement, both of international organizations such as intergovernmental and governmental organizations. IGOs, composed of member states established for single or multiple objectives. NGOs, generally private, voluntarily, and organizations whose members are either individuals or group gathered on a common purpose, rely on soft power. So, the first difference of the two organizations is their formers. The intergovernmental organizations are formed by states, while the non-governmental organizations are generally private, voluntarily organizations, and the members are individuals or a group of people. And the main purpose of NGOs is to solve a specific issue. Formal multilateral institutions. These are organizations formed between three or more nations to work on issues that relate to all of the countries in the organization, made for crucial decisions and coordinating actions in important policy areas like peace and security, trade, finance, and development. Number 1. United Nations. Aiming to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. It is the world's largest and most familiar international organization. International Monetary Fund, or IMF, aims to reducing global poverty, encouraging international trade, and promoting financial stability and economic growth. Has three main functions: overseeing economic development, lending, and capacity development. Number 3. General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade was a legal agreement minimizing barriers to international trade by reducing or eliminating tariffs and subsidies while preserving significant regulations. In here, the main function of the United Nations is to preserve international peace and security. Any state, whether it is a member of the UN or not, may bring any dispute or situation that endangers international peace and security to the attention of the Security Council or the General Assembly. While the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, is an organization of 190 countries working to promote global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reducing poverty around the world. Lastly is the GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. The main purpose of this agreement was to make the international trade much easier and because of the reduction of tariffs and other barriers to trade.
Next is perspectives on global governance. There are four defining or perspectives elements of international organization or regime. These are the principles, norms, rules, and decision-making procedure. First is principles. When we say principles, it is represented by those people who are capable of logical and consistent speech to give some statement or information to the people of how the world works in society and in every circumstances. Next is norm. It is about identifying the general standards, behavior, and identifying the rights and obligation of the states. Next is rules. It is usually used in a third world states. It is designed to restore conflicts that might be happening or existing between principles and norms. Last one is decision-making procedures. It is a series of steps taken by an individual to determine the best option or course of action to meet their needs. Seek information about different possible decisions and their likely effects.
Now, let's talk about neoliberal institutionalist and liberalist standpoint. Neoliberal institutionalist is contemporarily used to refer to market-oriented reform policies. For example, eliminating price controls, deregulating capital market, and lowering trade barriers and reducing. They made it possible through privatization and austerity. Next is liberalist standpoint. Liberalism became a distinct movement in the age of Enlightenment, gaining popularity among Western philosophers and economists. It is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed, and equality before the law. They generally support individual rights, which is human rights and civil rights, democracy, freedom of speech, press and religion, and a market economy. Liberals also ended mercantilist policies, royal monopolies, and other trade barriers. Instead, they promote a free trade and marketization.
Liberalist and realist views of regimes. Liberal institutionalist view. Regimes enable states to collaborate. Regimes promote the common good. Regimes flourish best when promoted and maintained by benign hegemon. Regimes promote globalization in a liberal world order. For a realist view, regimes enable states to coordinate. Regimes generate differential benefits for states. Power is the central feature of regime formation and survival. The nature of world order depends on the underlying principles and norms of regimes. Sa liberal view, kooperasyon ng mga bansa na may parehas na interes. Dito lahat ay nagkakaisa at may kinabang lahat ng sumali at sigurado ang benefit and gain. Samantalang sa realist view naman, they believe that one state should have comparative advantage in comparison to another. But they are still willing to cooperate as long as the other state doesn't gain more power.
Next is the United Nations resolve initiatives taken by governments of the states that had led the war against Germany and Japan. It is a universal membership. When joining, member states agreed to accept the obligations in the United Nations Charter, an international treaty that set out basic principles of international relations. First is sovereign equality of states. Second, only international problems are within UN jurisdictions. And last, primary concern of international peace and security. Security Council. The United Nations recognized great power prerogatives in the Security Council. The Security Council was given the main responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. It was made up initially of 11 states and then after 1965 of 15 states. It includes 5 permanent members: United States, United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. These 5 permanent members have veto power over all Security Council decisions. The convention emerged that abstention is not regarded as veto. Its decisions are binding and must only be passed by a majority of 9 out of 15 members.
UN definition of NGOs. 1. An NGO should support the aims and the work of the UN. Dapat suportahan ng NGO yung aims and goals ng UN. Number 2 is Officially, an NGO should be a representative body with identifiable headquarters and officers who are responsible to the Democratic Policymaking Conference. Ang NGO ay dapat merong representative na responsable sa paggawa ng mga democratic policy. Number 3. An NGO cannot be a profit-making body. Hindi pwedeng maging profit-making body ang NGO dahil ang purpose nila ay mag-serve sa government. 4. An NGO cannot use or advocate violence. Since sa government sila nagtatrabaho, hindi sila allowed na gumamit ng violence or any advocacy na kumukonekta sa violence. Number 5 is an NGO must respect the norms of non-interferential as internal affairs of state. Dapat irespeto ng NGO yung norms or culture ng internal affairs ng isang bansa. And lastly, number 6, an international NGO is one that is not established by the intergovernmental agreement. Yung international NGO is hindi siya in-establish ng international governmental agreement. Most likely, they are voluntarily